Alright, so when people build PCs nowadays, they're quick to opt for the newest parts out there instead of hopping on the used market and searching for a few hidden gems, because trust me, they're out there, you just have to put in a little more effort to find them. But not everyone is willing to search, and that's fine. In fact, that leaves more gems out there just waiting to be found. In my opinion, one of these gems is the legendary X79 LGA 2011 platform. See, the funny thing is, all I have to say is that the LGA 2011 socket was made back in 2011. And a lot of people will instantly lose interest in the platform and label it as obsolete and whatnot. But the truth is, if you can find a good deal on an X79 motherboard, you'll really enjoy the selection of CPUs at your disposal for the price. I'm sure you've heard about Xeons being a great budget CPU option right now in terms of core count and overclocking capabilities. And if you'd like to buy one or an older enthusiast i7, then this platform is where they're at. Of course, there is also the X79 platform or LGA 2011 V3, which is not what I'm talking about here today. This video is exclusively about the original LGA 2011 socket. Obviously, I've only said good things about this platform as a whole so far, but in this video, we're going to discuss both the pros and cons of buying into this platform. Alright, so the first thing to start with is really a con. In fact, this is the deciding factor on whether or not you should buy an X79 motherboard. Can you find one for a good price? These boards are, I guess you could say, a bit rare nowadays, and so quite commonly when there's a seller online who knows what they're doing, they'll tend to set the prices to something a bit higher than what they should be. But now, I'm going to directly contradict myself and say that you can actually get an X79 board for a good price without really even being a problem. But of course there's a catch, otherwise I wouldn't have said that these boards are rare in the first place. And that catch is that these boards aren't made by your commonly known motherboard manufacturer like Gigabyte or Asus. Instead, they're made by the likes of Plex HD and Aethermiter. Yeah, you've probably never heard of these manufacturers before, and that's probably because they're located in China and sell these boards on sites like AliExpress. Now, I probably will make a video specifically about buying PC hardware from AliExpress, but what I will say here is that I own one of these boards. It's simply called the Aethermiter X79, and I've only really had good experiences with it so far. I bought it online for about €85, but now they seem to have dropped a little bit in price, so you can find them more in the €70 price range, or even less. For an X79 motherboard, that sounds like a steal. The thing is, these motherboards use recycled X79 chipsets from old boards. They're plopped onto a new PCB and boom, we get these boards. The main thing I would keep in mind when buying these boards are be aware that they probably aren't fitted with the most beefy of VRMs, so if you're planning on overclocking, maybe opt for a more pricey board, something in the €80 to €90 price bracket. And be sure to look for reviews specifically on overclocking, because if you're going to learn, you're better off learning from someone else's mistakes than your own in this case. The other option for overclocking is buying a used board online made by your average reputable manufacturer, because those X79 boards can all overclock to some extent. Another benefit I learned these Chinese boards have is the compatibility for just about anything. Any X79 CPU, ECC RAM, whether it be registered or unbuffered, any regular RAM, it just doesn't have any problems, as opposed to my ASRock X79 Extreme 4, which, by the way, I got an insane deal on, which can only support unbuffered ECC RAM and not registered ECC. In fact, when using the Aethermiter board, I was using both unbuffered and registered ECC simultaneously, which I think is pretty cool to say the very least. One last thing to add about these boards is they have quirks. Don't expect them to be perfect. Some don't have USB 3.0 like the Aethermiter I own, and some of them don't support sleep mode, which is way less important but still something to note. But again, I never had any actual problems with this board, and so I really have no problems recommending it to people. Again, just be wary about VRMs, USB 3 and the like. Now, with the motherboards out of the way, the real benefits start rolling in, and I'm talking about the beautiful selection of CPUs. And for the price, I'm telling you now, you won't be complaining. But you may be asking yourself, where on earth is this stash of LGA 2011 CPUs I've been talking about? Some might have guessed by now, and yes, it's AliExpress. The only con here is the delivery time. If you're in Ireland or Britain, expect about a 20 to 30 day shipping time. I can't say for anywhere else because, well, I don't live there. But at the end of the day, when you're on a budget, slow delivery is more than likely a sacrifice you're willing to make. So I did just say these CPUs are a great price, but just hearing me say it isn't enough, so let me show you. Let's see what €20 can get you. Keep in mind, the cheapest Ryzen 3 CPU still averages at about €100 give or take, and that has 4 cores and 8 threads. What I found is a Xeon E5-2650 V2. It's got 8 cores, 16 threads, and a base clock of 2.6 GHz that can boost up to 3.4 GHz. Now, of course, it's not the speediest thing on the planet, but 8 cores for €20 is already a bargain. Sadly, I don't have one of these on me, but what I do have is essentially the same thing, only with 6 cores and 12 threads. Enter the E5-2630 V2. A couple of months ago, I bought this on AliExpress for €20, but now they can be found for about a tenner. I'll show you guys the performance on this thing after we talk about the RAM. Now for RAM, since this isn't the newest platform, you are of course limited to DDR3. Now that's not that bad at all, but obviously it should be mentioned. What should also be mentioned is that you also have the option of buying ECC RAM on the X79 platform, which is cheaper, but you've got to make sure this is compatible with your board or CPU. For example, my old i7-3930K does not support ECC, so even if my board did, I couldn't use it either way. Same goes vice versa. But if both your CPU and motherboard support ECC, you've got to watch out for one more thing. There are 2 types of ECC RAM. Registered and unbuffered ECC. My ASRock X79 Extreme 4, for example, only supports unbuffered ECC, so when I first put my ECC RAM into it, it just wouldn't post. And that's because it was running a mix of registered and unbuffered ECC RAM. Like I said, my AliExpress X79 board worked with both types simultaneously, so I had all 24GB of RAM in that board, but I was left with only 4GB of unbuffered ECC once I switched boards. Obviously that didn't do, so I used 16GB of normal 2133MHz RAM. So that's what you've got to watch out for when considering ECC RAM. But of course, normal RAM removes all possible complications and is guaranteed to work with all X79 boards. But for the price, if ECC is supported, I would opt with that. Now it's time for a quick benchmark. Here we will test the Xeon E5-2630 V2 on a few games I've selected. Now for these benchmarks, the Xeon will be paired with 16GB of 2133MHz RAM and a GTX 1070. Now I know the 1070 isn't the most budget-friendly graphics card to begin with, and that's especially now with the surge in graphics card pricing, but I'm using it so that there aren't any bottlenecks so you guys can see the full potential of the €10 Xeon. I can't keep stressing it enough, this CPU costs as much as a fast food meal, possibly including delivery. But anyway, here are the results. Again, that was a €10 CPU at work. My new CPU, the Xeon E5-1680 V2, just arrived, and that's about the best chip you can get on this platform. I will be dropping a video on that one soon, so stay tuned if you'd be interested. You'll notice that in the games, the main culprit was either the graphics card or the CPU clock speed, which shows that a €10 CPU can be bottlenecked by a normally €200 graphics card. With that said, the 1070 is the fastest card I would pair with this chip, as anything above sounds like it could be bottlenecked by this chip. But hey, I haven't tried it, so I wouldn't know. And once again, that was a €10 chip. Now, the final thing I want to address with the X79 platform is the power consumption. The E5-2630 V2 has a TDP of 85 watts, which nowadays is a little higher than your average CPU. But my old i7-3930K had a TDP of 130 watts. Now, that isn't an efficient chip by any stretch of the imagination. I would recommend a 450 watt power supply at the very least when you hop onto the LGA 2011 socket. And definitely opt for a trusted manufacturer. No skimping out on the heart of your system. On top of that, since certain chips use quite a bit of power, the more efficient the PSU, the better. So yeah, that was about all there is to say. So do I recommend X79 to anyone out there? Of course. Personally, I think that the price to performance is great, and I also think anyone out there on a budget looking to invest into a used system would be extremely satisfied with what the X79 platform can offer. So if you enjoyed this video, consider liking and maybe even subscribing. These are the kind of videos you can expect to see on this channel, along with some other tech-related content. But on that note, I hope you all have a good night, and I hope to see you next time.